It was a big weekend for Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. On Saturday, the Democratic presidential hopeful was confronted by protesters claiming to be from the Black Lives Matter movement. Protesters stormed the stage during a rally in Seattle. They took over the microphone and forced the senator to leave without speaking. Sanders worked his way into the crowd to meet people one-on-one. He had this to say in reaction.
I think it's unfortunate because, among other things, I wanted to talk about the issue of black lives, of the fact that the American people are tired of seeing unarmed African Americans shot and killed. But there are other issues as well that we have to talk about.
Sanders didn't let Saturday's interruption stop his momentum. On Sunday, he set a record for the largest number of supporters at a political event in the 2016 race. 28,000 supporters attended his rally in Portland, Oregon. I'm joined now by Gyasi Ross, editor-at-large for Indian Country Today Media Network, who was a speaker at the rally in Seattle. Also, Larry Cohen, former Communication Workers of America president, who is now Bernie Sanders' campaign surrogate. Brother Ross, you were on stage at the Seattle rally. What's your reaction to Saturday's event?
Thank you, Professor. I was actually not a speaker. I was a supporter of both Senator Sanders as well as the folks who were there on behalf of the Black Lives Matter crew. My reaction was that from the Native community, we absolutely understand the energy and the frustration and the sense of urgency that happens within the Black Lives Matter movement. In fact, as Native people are please kill us at a higher rate than any other ethnicity in the country. We also have one of the highest incarceration rates, the lowest life expectancy. 3 in 5 Native women are the victims of sexual assaults, and nobody's having that conversation, or alternatively, nobody's including us in that conversation. So I understand that sense of urgency, and I commend the young ladies on there bringing that urgency to the forefront. My only consternation with it or question was that I'm not sure that Senator Sanders was the best recipient of that lesson, because he has tended to be on the right side of history, and moreover, culturally, Native people, we tend to revere our elders, the elders from our tribe. And even though Bernie Sanders ethnically is not a member of my tribe, because of his worldview and because of his progressive stance, he's certainly an elder that I respect, and I think that he deserved a little bit of deference.
No doubt. So, Larry, activists have been asking progressives like Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley to take up the issue at recent events. Do you think Sanders handled this particular event well, certainly by contrast to the Netroots Nation event?
Yeah, I think not only the event, but if you check out BernieSanders.com, you see a list of priorities in terms of why Black lives do matter and what we need to do about criminal justice in our nation. So Bernie supports an end to mandatory sentences for nonviolent crimes, supports community policing, supports body cameras, and I could go on and on about this. And I think most encouraging, as you mentioned, is last night, for example, in Portland, where you saw an array of people coming together talking about Black Lives Matter, environmental justice. This was a sea kayaker from Greenpeace who had stopped the Shell icebreaker for 40 hours, sitting in the water there with 100 other kayakers. You saw a young immigration activist talk about what happens to our families. And I think the promise of this campaign, and why I'm excited about it, is that we bring folks together in a new populism that includes all of these issues at the same time on parallel tracks.
Certainly. Gyasi, do you think you can give us a bit of historical understanding of the fact that the frustration that you've always referred to here as legitimate is something that even many white progressives, however, have not completely comprehended? And I think the subordination of race or ethnicity to class has been a concern, although Bernie Sanders certainly has admirably responded in recognizing that. But give a sense of the background there, that progressives have not always understood the specificity of the ethnic and racial formation of inequality that has been expressed.
Yeah, well, one of the things Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, right, she speaks about intersectionality. And absolutely, we have to speak the language of class, economics, but there's also a special type of ostracizing and a special type of vulnerability that happens when you're a member of certain vulnerable races, certain vulnerable genders, like a woman, or we see recently the transgender discussion. With Native people, for example, we have historically, we're not even invited to these conversations. There's a conversation that's happening in our house, that's happening at our table, and we're not even allowed to have a conversation with those folks having that conversation. And that has a lot to do with race, and specifically with these young ladies, the frustration of being a young black person who has decidedly different concerns than older generation black folks, who even civil rights generation black folks who are progressives, but there's a young voice that needs to be had, and these young ladies occupied that space. And once again, I think that there's a bit of confusion or question regarding Bernie Sanders specifically and him being the recipient of this sort of movement, but at the same time, their frustration is absolutely coming from a commendable and brave space, and I think it's a necessary conversation.
Sure. Larry, Hillary Clinton is in New Hampshire today. She holds about a 6-point lead over Bernie Sanders in that state. What do you think Bernie has to do to overcome those numbers?
Well, I think it's an organizing challenge from our point of view. We're not in the race for money in the same way that Secretary Clinton and others are, but we are in the organizing race. Several million people have already volunteered, and the way we will approach New Hampshire and Iowa and the states that come after it is to build this base and to activate this new populism and to connect issues that are parallel issues, whether it's racial justice or organizing rights or immigration rights. And I think you'll see that whether it's a state like New Hampshire or whether it's a state like South Carolina.
All right, Gyasi Ross and Larry Cohen, thank you so much for joining us.